Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. Joining me now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. I spoke to him a few months ago when the book first came out, the book Belichick by Ian O'Connor. You've seen his work on ESPN, ESPN.com, and the ESPN app. And now with the Patriots back in another Super Bowl. Who better to have come back and talk about it? Ian, appreciate the time.
Hi, Josh. How are you?
Doing good. You know, when I first spoke to you back, at the end of September, early October, it was just a few weeks after the book came out. So all these months since the book came out, what has been the general response from people in and around the NFL about the Belichick book?
Well, a lot of people just felt they didn't know that much about him. So I got a fair amount of response on just learning about his life growing up, his father, and how he shaped him, his mentors in high school and college and prep school. But I think probably the overriding narrative, at least for people outside of New England who were football fans, and many of them despised Belichick, was that they found him a little bit more likable after reading it. I got that from a lot of people. And that was important to me, at least to try to humanize him and deliver what I hoped was the defining portrait of the man and not just the coach. So that's why I interviewed 350-plus people, and hopefully I was able to pull that off.
One of the things you mentioned in the book that someone else pointed out to you when you spoke to them was about the fact that that individual felt that, Bill Belichick, he's more of a product of his father than he is of Bill Parcells. I thought that was a very fascinating point in the book because a lot of people, there was the two Bills 30 for 30 ESPN documentary. There's been a lot of talk that, the Parcells tree. But, I think, at least for me, from reading the book, I think that point stands true that this is an individual in Bill Belichick. People assume, him and Parcells, but really Bill Belichick is his own man.
No question, and his father did really shape him as a human being and as a coach. His dad, of course, was a longtime assistant at the Naval Academy, and Bill just being around that academy and great Heisman winners like Roger Staubach and Joe Bellino, and beyond that, just seeing the urgency applied to every single thing and every detail that the student athletes at Navy dealt with on and off the field, and they were trained not to be football players but to be future combat officers, and so I think Bill was really impacted in a profound way by that experience growing up. And the Parcells relationship, listen, it was a great partnership with the Giants for 12 years, and it worked. But the 3 years, they were never close friends. That's always been a myth. And Belichick has never really truly looked at Parcells as his mentor. He was his boss. And with the Jets, those 3 years before Belichick went to New England, Parcells was brutal on him, and that was one of the reasons why Belichick left. And because Parcells was going upstairs in some vague front office role, and at that point, the sources I talked to, and close friends and associates who've been around Bill a long time, that was a chief reason why he just felt he needed to get away from Parcells and establish his own program, and that's exactly what he did. It's the greatest program in NFL history.
One of the things you outline in the book as well is just the plethora of relationships that Belichick has established throughout his life. I mean, this is a guy his football roots go back 3-4 decades at this point. It seems like from what you've done with all the interviews, you've really put into this book the fact that Bill Belichick, in many ways, he is there's this like interwoven web with him and the rest of the football world.
Yeah, he has, listen, he's been touched by so many people, and his first NFL coach or head coach, Ted Marchibroda, was a great influence on him. Marchibroda was one of the gentlemen of the craft, and that 1975 season was formative for Belichick because in those post-Unitas years early on, the Colts really were struggling in the fan base. That's a great football city, or it was at the time, and sort of the 75 season was a renaissance of sorts, a romance sort of re-engaged between the city and the franchise. And Belichick saw that happen, and that team made a run and got back to the playoffs. And it was a really good experience for him to go through that with Marchibroda he was truly a mentor to Bill and gave him his first job. But going back even to high school, Al Laramore's high school coach, his prep school coach, Steve Sirota, and he took so much from those early coaches he worked under that, and of course his father, and I think with his father, the emphasis on special teams and attention to detail, and at the Naval Academy, seeing that staff, his father included, have to treat every day with Game 7 of the World Series intensity and urgency, because that was life at the Academy for those student athletes. That's the way Bill runs his program now. In May, in mini camp, in preseason games and practices, Bill treats that like it's January football or the first Sunday in February, and that trickles down to the entire roster, and that's why the Patriots have 5 rings and have really separated themselves from every other franchise in the NFL.
Ian O'Connor joining me on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. The book is Belichick. If you want to get a real in-depth, not just history on Bill Belichick, but you could say a history of the NFL, this is the book you want to pick up. And now, Ian, with Belichick, this is the 9th appearance for him and Brady. I mean, this is unprecedented, but I have to ask you, because you do spend a good amount of time also on Brady in the book, explaining his background, explaining, the development of his relationship with Belichick. Do you feel like that Brady has been more important to Belichick's legacy, or has Belichick been more important to Brady's legacy? Or is it even?
Well, Josh, I think it's close to a 50-50 proposition, and because I've written a book on Belichick, I'm going to lean that way a little bit and say it's 51-49 in favor of the coach. Tom Brady is the greatest football player ever, and Belichick certainly needed him as the centerpiece of his program. There's no doubt about that. I think each guy, Belichick would be worth an extra ring or two to a very good quarterback who's already proven he can win a Super Bowl. I think Brady would be worth a ring or two to a very good head coach who's already proven he can win a Super Bowl. So I think they'd have the same kind of effect on a different partner. But Belichick, Brady's on the field for offense. Belichick is coaching offense. He's coaching defense and special teams. And he built that entire culture that revolves around the special player in Brady. And because of that, because he's got to manage everything, and because of his amazing ability to find cast-offs and veteran free agents who did next to nothing in their previous stops. I mean, most of America had never heard of Rex Burkhead when he was at Cincinnati. Here he is scoring the 2 most important touchdowns of the season in Kansas City to send the Patriots back to the Super Bowl. Because he's had 1,000 Rex Burkheads, I would lean slightly toward Belichick being the more important or impactful figure, but it's really, really close.
It's funny because, even Belichick has said that Lawrence Taylor is the greatest player that he's ever seen. And, when he's been asked about Brady this week, he said, he's a great quarterback, but he wouldn't say he's the greatest player of all time, like you just said. And I think that for me, and again, this is just my opinion, and you could tell me if this is a good perspective or not, I think part of the thing for Belichick was that because he comes from that defensive background, because he coached defense for so long, that Lawrence Taylor has such a massive impact on him as a football man that maybe there's a little bias for Bill when it comes to Lawrence.
That's possible, Josh. I also think he's got such a deep affection for the Giants and his time in that organization. And listen, LT doesn't play for him anymore. LT is long retired. Tom Brady is a current player. Belichick is never going to say something like that about a current player on his roster. He doesn't even, when he's asked if he's the greatest coach of all time, he doesn't even want to put himself in the category with the Paul Browns and Lombardis and the others. And so I wasn't really surprised that it was funny because he was asked a very direct question, is Tom Brady the greatest quarterback of all time? And he worked around it and said his career is unmatched. I'm glad I have, but he wouldn't say those words. He would say it about Lawrence Taylor because he's long gone. He's retired. But Tom Brady's got to win a football game for him on Sunday. So he was never, ever going to answer that question with a very direct answer.
How much longer do you think Robert Kraft is going to stay as involved with the organization as he is? I'm not trying to, say that he's fading away, but, he is getting up there in age. And I know that, from your book and from other reporting that Jonathan has been more and more, his son, involved in the operations. How much longer do you think Robert Kraft is going to be as involved as he is in the Patriots organization?
It's a very good question, and I've been asked so much about how long Brady and Belichick are going to stick around that's kind of a first for me with Kraft, and I don't know the answer to that. I think he's got some years left in him. And when I've talked to him, and he seems still very much engaged in the ownership of that team and running it. And yes, Jonathan is the obvious successor in waiting. Belichick is a young 66, so I see him with another 4 or 5 years coaching if he wants to do it. And he very much does right now. He absolutely adores the craft as much as he did 20 years ago. And he is youthful. And Tom Brady, I had a phone conversation with him in the spring of 2017 where we were talking about him playing beyond age 45 to 46 and 47. So I think Brady and Belichick have a number of seasons left in them, and I imagine Kraft will go along for the ride all the way through.
If there was one thing that you, from your observations, writing this book, covering the AFC East as you have, and seeing what you've seen around the NFL, what do you think is the one thing that could get in the way of the prolonging of this Patriots dynasty?
And God forbid, an injury to Brady. And I think all of football doesn't want to see that happen. But his greatest ability is availability, right? Outside of 2008, one of Tom Brady's, maybe his greatest talent is staying on the field every single Sunday, every single year. And that has allowed this dynasty to carry on forever. It really has. And we just seen I know it's a different sport, a big trade in the NBA where the Knicks send out Porzingis. Mm-hmm. Well, Porzingis is a high maintenance guy, really, to be honest, and he hasn't been on the court. If right. You're going to cause some headaches, you have to play at least. And I think Brady just embodies the necessity of a franchise player to actually play for the franchise, and Porzingis wasn't doing that. So I think that is the one thing, because nothing else is really going to change. If Brady stays healthy, and maybe isn't going to be the best quarterback in the league the next 3 seasons, but if he's in the top 5 and he stays healthy, Bill is going to continue finding the Rex Burkheads of the world to be a supporting cast for him. They obviously need at some point here an explosive outside playmaker. They can't live forever without one of those, although they might be able to, given the fact that they can cover all their flaws and have for a long time. I think that's one thing. And a pass rusher would be nice, a really consistent one and a prolific one. But they'll find ways. Just keep Brady healthy and upright, and I think the winning will go on. And if you're a Dolphins fan or a Jets fan or a Bills fan, this is the ultimate nightmare. It never, ever ends. And I can't even imagine what a Jets fan is thinking right now. You have Sam Darnold as your franchise quarterback waiting for the Patriot window to close, but it never closes. It's got to be a most frustrating thing.
The book is Belichick. Ian O'Connor has been my guest on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Folks, I read the Tiger Woods book earlier this year. To me, this Belichick book is on par with that Tiger Woods book. If you want to know about the history of Belichick in the NFL and how deep it goes, this is the book for you. Ian, appreciate your time, and I hope you get to enjoy Super Bowl 53.
Thanks so much, Josh. Take care.